Hi, this is Jim Musser with Upstream Ministries, and this is episode 74 on Views from Downstream. And I have a warning for church leaders and parents. I'm about, in some people's mind, to commit heresy when I talk about children in the worship service. It has been a practice for a number of decades now where we are basically taking children and teens out of the adult worship service and giving them services of their own or just activities of their own. And parents seem to really appreciate that, because I've heard parents say they appreciate not having to watch their kids and control their behavior while they're in a worship service. And I understand that. And I empathize with parents. But I think we have to look at the broader picture of things. And that is that we have a real issue among young people. I experience this a lot in campus ministry, where young people do not know how to interact with adults apart from parents and maybe other close relatives. They are just uncomfortable with it. They don't know how to have conversations. They don't feel like they have any reason to get to know other adults. And so they just aren't very comfortable and trying to establish those relationships. And I think that part of that is we have, as a society, but particularly as Christians, have isolated our kids from other adults besides our own families. And so when you take kids out of a worship service and put them in there with their own peers, which frankly they spend, if they're in school age, they spend most of their weeks in classes with their peers, in recess with their peers, and activities with their peers. And so they don't have, except for teachers and maybe coaches, they don't have really much connection, interaction with adults. And so in the church, they are isolated. They have their own worship service, their own activities. And I think that is not a wise decision that churches have made over the years. I understand it, and it also helps with worship services having a facility that they can contain the numbers, because if you suddenly add all the youth and the kids, then you have a need for a greater space. But I think the downside is that kids, one, don't learn to interact with adults. Two, they don't learn that there are times in your life where you have to be quiet, where you have to be obedient. And if you're fussy, if you're complaining, then there's some discipline that comes with that. Because I've been in foreign countries, very poor countries, where, like in Haiti, Honduras, where these churches don't have the facilities, they don't have the money to hire people to work with their kids, to babysit their kids, or just to occupy them while there's a worship service going on. They are a part of the service, and they work to discipline the kids, to handle misbehavior. They are able to do it. And the kids are, in my experience, are well behaved in that. I mean, there's obviously, kids are kids and they will have their struggles, but for the most part, they aren't disrupted to the service. But we are, in America, so concerned about not having things disrupted. We think we need a break from our kids, and pastors, leaders think that parents will be happier if they their kids are taken care of during that time on Sunday morning. But I just think it goes against the natural way of community, where kids are part of the community and they need to feel like they're a part of the community and included and not separated off. And this is particularly important with teens. I think teens need to be in with the adults. They are on their way to becoming emerging adults. They need to learn how to interact with adults. They need to learn to process and listen to things without always being entertained. And I just think it's a much more healthy approach than what we've fallen into. And I don't think it was intentional that we did this. I think it just over time, we just found it easier. I remember growing up, there was a cry room, and you took the infants there, but all the other kids were there, including me. And I often would lay on my mom's lap, and I would be bored to death, but I don't remember creating any kind of disturbance. It was just, that's the way it was, and I was used to it, and so I just made it through. But now it's like kids can be much more difficult to deal with in those kind of situations, and so to alleviate that, we've moved them away from the adults to put them in a different area of the church. And again, I just think that goes against the natural state of a community. A community of believers includes babies, includes children, includes teenagers. And they need to be incorporated into our community and not exiled, in a sense, for a few hours, being a part of their own community. So I just want to encourage pastors and parents to really think seriously about the practice of isolating, segmenting our kids from the adults, particularly on Sunday morning, because I think we miss out on just what, again, a part of real community, of having all those kids and teens in there. And yeah, it's a little disruptive, but that's life. And we shouldn't avoid it just because, well, we prefer something different. We need to think of what this does to our kids, what this does to us as a community. And so I just want you to think about that. And again, I know that there's probably going to be pushback from this, but I just believe that we need to start thinking about that. There's just a thing in the church where we have gotten into a routine, and the typical church does things the same way, week after week, month after month, year after year. And we need to take a step back and say, why are we doing this? And is it really beneficial to the overall community that we're doing this? Or are there other ways that we can approach it? So I'm going to leave it there, but something to think about and meditate on. And I will see you next week for some more thoughts on the church and the worship service. Until then, have a great week, and we'll see you back here hopefully next week.